Hey everyone, thanks for popping into the Coffee People podcast for an interlude throwback episode to August, when I was a judge, in the coffee roasting competition hosted for the very first time by our friends and collaborators at Hacea Coffee Source. I'm your host Ryan Woldt, and this show, the Coffee People podcast, as I just mentioned, is part of the Roast West Coast Coffee Network and presented by Roastery Coffee Packaging. They're supporting this effort even between seasons. All of the clips you're about to hear were recorded in a super professional way, and definitely not on the voice notes app on my phone. Just kidding. That's obviously what I did. I was on the move. What are you going to do? I'm going to skip ahead just a little bit in our timeline to share a chat I had with Emily Smith, the newest member of Team Hacea, talking about the roasting competition itself.
I'm Emily Smith, and I'm the newest member to the Hacea team. Been with Hacea for about the last 8 months.
We just spent the morning tasting what I would call a load, but I think like 40 different coffees. Excuse my language, everyone. For this roasting competition that you're doing, the first annual Hacea Coffee Blend Roasting Competition. Is that the official title? You guys sent out 3 different coffees to 75 to 100 different roasters and asked for them to work on it and send it back, and we've been tasting them. Like, why do this? What inspired it?
So we used to have the Roasters Guild retreat every summer, right around this time, and there was always a roasting competition that was a part of the event. And my experiences in those competitions were always really positive. It gave you the opportunity to get your hands on coffees that maybe you normally wouldn't select or you normally wouldn't think about using for a blend. So I wanted to create something, a competition, but really just an educational opportunity for people to engage with coffees that were new to them without any kind of preconceived notions about how that coffee should be roasted, but rather just relying on their own skill set and their own ability to taste and experience the coffees.
Did the roasters know what coffees they were getting beforehand?
No. So the roasters each got a competition entry pack that had 3 coffees in it. Each coffee was in a bag on its own, and the bags were labeled A, B, and C. So it was completely blind.
So they really had to have a bunch of different skill sets potentially, or maybe coffees. If they knew 2 of the coffees and they were ones they recognized, like I've worked with these before, but not the third, they had to learn that kind of as they went.
Yeah, I think the most important skill set with these coffees is really just the ability to problem solve. So as a roaster, you're constantly going into situations where the coffee maybe is different than how you had expected. It's different from the previous year's crop, or even as it's aging, there are changes in how the coffee's moisture and is affecting the roast and your outcome. So a big part of these, the idea of doing this mystery competition is that somebody would use the skills of, use their sensory skills and be able to cup the coffee or make pour-overs of the coffee, but from that experience, look at how they modify the roast to develop. I don't think anybody comes into this having a roast profile that they can just throw on the for these coffees. It's all about the skill of problem solving with challenging coffees.
Yeah, as a non-roaster, it definitely seems like a challenge. Emily, thanks for all of that. I have to say, I think you're probably the most well-spoken of the Hacea team that I've met so far.
Well, thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome. The roasting competition's biggest challenge was that the roasters were doing it blind, forcing them to engage with the coffee without any preconceived, or at least confirmed preconceived, perspectives on the green bean. They had to engage with it, identify, develop, and adapt on the fly, and do it quickly, which I also had to do as a judge. It is not quite Coffee Fest, but I'm calling it Morning 1 because I'm heading up to Los Angeles to meet the team over at Hacea Coffee Source. I am recording while trying to back out of my little parking spot here, which is probably not super intelligent. But I have eaten a big breakfast, a whole bunch of eggs and keto toast and goat cheese, because I think we're responsible for trying 35 coffees today in the Hacea Coffee Source Roasting Championship, the first inaugural up in Anaheim. And it'll be a good opportunity to kind of get involved in the roasting competition corner of the industry, see how all that works, and learn a whole hell of a lot about how to score a cup of coffee. I've spent a lot of time the last few years tasting coffees and cupping coffees and being intentional about what I'm doing, but the whole scoring thing is frankly pretty daunting, and the pace at which we're going to have to do it seems scary. So I'm going to spend the drive up to Los Angeles mentally motivating myself, manifesting confidence, I think is the way they would say it in today's social circles. But we'll see how it goes. Wish me luck. So the red line on the map is just getting longer and longer, which is the problem with events in Los Angeles if you live in Southern California. And as I am sitting here, surrounded by sportsmobile vans and semi-trucks and more Porsches and Teslas than I have ever seen in my life, I am feeling some very serious imposter syndrome about being a judge in this competition. I know I'm the wild card. I'm not a coffee professional. I just tell coffee stories and learn about coffee from people smarter than me. But that doesn't mean that I should be a judge in this competition. I don't mean to laugh, and I'm not trying to take away from the comp. I appreciate the invite. I think there's a lot of value in having a lot of different opinions. Thankfully, I am not the only judge. I'm one of many. But the longer I sit in traffic, the more nervous I get, and the louder the trucks around me get. Checking in again soon. Okay, it's day 2 of the Hacea Roasting Championship judging. Day 1 was intense. There's 3 different coffees that all of our roasters, about 74 of them, were given, and they had to blend them together, and we are judging them on this crazy 8-category scale, including can you sense or taste each of the different coffees? How do they balance together? The acidity, the complexity, the sweetness. And when 74 different roasters roast the same coffee and blend it in various ratios, you get a lot of variation. Quite shocking, actually, but it's also a challenge to pick out, qualifiers that say this one is better than that one, because so many have very similar traits. It really evens the playing field quite a bit. In the room are 4 Q-Graders, led by our fearless leaders here at Hacea, Jared and Luke Hales, and then me. I am not a Q-Grader. I'm just a guy who drinks coffee all the time. So I'm definitely the wild card here. But hopefully, at the end of the day, my scores and my notes are valuable to a roaster somewhere. And I'm looking forward to a whole nother day of this. I think we have 40 coffees to go. So I have to say, being intentional and mindful during a tasting may not sound hard, but try doing it for several hours a day with 75 different coffees, all of whom use the same beans. The scale was fairly daunting. And it was important to remember that we weren't just doing this for funsies. We had a responsibility to judge honestly and accurately, and then provide feedback for a slew of roasters who each used their own time, money, and effort to develop this coffee. We had to start each judging session with a full passion bucket, because it is easy to get overwhelmed or even dismissive when so many coffees have overlapping flavor profiles, which of course is a result of them using the same base coffee beans. That also made it noticeable when one coffee would really stand out. Someone would just knock it out of the park. You'd even see the heads of the other judges kind of nodding and maybe take an occasional extra slurp at the table and then go back for more, and even sometimes again. It wasn't technically table talk, but it was an acknowledgement that there were a handful that really stood out. For the record, the judges calibrated their tastes at the beginning of each session, and we were cupping blind too. We didn't know who roasted what. After all the roasting and then all the judging, there was the celebrating. So we just announced the winners of the Hacea roasting competition that we spent all week judging their coffees, and now we're here at the party and everybody's excited. In the top 5, some great coffees, including third place was Carrie Elliott of Elliott Murray Coffee. I think they're now called Mom's Drink Coffee, or Mom's Roast Coffee rather, up in Oregon, former guest of the Coffee People podcast. And our number 1 coffee, remember, we tasted all of them blind, was from a guy named Max, who's just a home brewer. I don't mean just, he's a home brewer, home roaster in Philadelphia. And that's pretty awesome. So if you're out there and you listen to the show and you're roasting coffee at home and you're feeling like an imposter, kind of like I felt all week judging these coffees, know that you could be brewing, roasting, making, developing flavors and coffees just as good as some legit world champion coffee roasters who were part of this roasting competition. I think we had 2 former world champion roasters that were at least part of our top 75. And in the end, it was Max from Philadelphia. So congrats to Max and congrats to Hacea. This was such a cool experience to be included as a judge, and also to get some of these delicious cocktails now here at the party to celebrate everybody. And I'm looking forward to tomorrow at Coffee Fest, because there'll be more coffee there. And some of these cool people I've met tonight, like Andrew and Lee from True Love, and Jeff and Michaela from Bear Coast, and just all these incredible coffee people that are connecting and collecting together in one place, will be here in Los Angeles, right near my home. Until then. I've since learned that the winner, Max Zelenovich, was on the verge of going pro. His coffee roasting company, Brainwave Roasters, is a micro roaster based in the suburbs of Philadelphia. They launched officially just a month or so ago, but he had been a home roaster up until then. You'll learn a lot more about Max in the near future, as he is a guest on an upcoming episode of Coffee People. We've already chatted, and I'm really excited to share that with you. When the judging was all over, we still had this thing called Coffee Fest to attend. The very first person I ran into on Sunday morning was one of the competition's competitors, who offered up some sage advice about competition, which I caught some of. We jump into our chat about halfway through, and we're talking about the success of NBA basketball star LeBron James, who is also the league's all-time leading scorer. And now that I say that out loud, we might have been talking about Michael Jordan too. Can't remember, but I think it was LeBron. Here you go. Anyway, Steve's advice still holds.
Like, no one ever keeps track of how many misses he has. So he has, even though people are like, he has the all-time high scoring, he has the all-time high missing. So it was just like, you have to fail so much to actually create some achievement.
Yeah.
So I always tell people, I'm like, I always tell, compete enough and you'll accidentally win. And so like, that's kind of how my mentality of these are, where I just like, I don't take anything to heart. So I just keep competing and losing, and then eventually, you'll end up winning one and be happy about it. But,
it's a great perspective. If you wouldn't mind, name and the name of your roaster, and then tell me what your kind of first day in LA for Coffee Fest was like.
Okay, so my name is Steve Cuevas. I'm the master roaster at Lucky's Coffee Roaster. I wear a bunch of different hats for them, but my first day involved, it was super hectic. So the first event I had to go to was the coffee games out at Copa Vida, where we had to dial in espresso and then present it to the judge. The second thing I went to was the Hacea roasting competition, which they sent us 3 mystery coffees, and we created a blend and turned those into the judges. Then at the Calafia party at night, which I got entered into a latte art competition, unbeknownst to me, but I got to set a new record where I got to lose all 3 of the competitions in one day. So that's my new record, where I'm 0 for 3 for competition that day. So,
man. Steve, I hope that next year you try to do 0 for 4.
Oh, well, that's okay. So that's the thing, right? That's the thing
New
about
challenge.
the thing about having goals is always setting them higher.
Yeah.
So the next one is like I got to do 4 competitions and lose at all 4 of them. You know.
Someday you'll win all 3 in one day, and it's going to be
but
crazy.
then where do you go from there? You know, there's then you got to win.
You
4.
retire to an island somewhere, and it's just glory from the heavens. That's what it's like.
I enjoy competing, so to me it was just kind of like, it doesn't stop me losing, so it doesn't push me to keep going. I just enjoy it, so it's just one of those things. So
I love it.
Okay, that's all for this interlude episode. I'll share the links to Hacea's recap and the competitor scores in the podcast show notes, and of course in our newsletter, which you can find on roastwestcoast.com or on coffeepeoplepodcast.com. Whichever you prefer, they both go to the same place. Thank you for popping in today, and if you're doing so on Apple or Spotify, please tap the follow button and give us as many stars as you feel we've earned. Or if, like me, you're an analog human, tell one of your friends about this show. It really helps. Shout out to Roastar Coffee Packaging, found at roastar.com. They are this podcast's presenting sponsor and will help you tell the big story of your small business. I actually met with someone this morning who's ordering 100 of their recyclable tins, and they were so excited because they could order 100 for this kind of special one-off coffee they were using. Roastar's doing what it takes to support kind of the little guy, which I love. We're also supported by other great coffee industry partners, including Zumbar Coffee and Tea, Hacea Coffee, and Cape Horn Green Coffee Importers. Crossings Coffee and Hacea Coffee Source specifically support our Coffee Smarter efforts. Ignite Coffee Company, Ascend Coffee Roasters, Civets Roasting Machines, Me and My Uncle Coffee, Craft 42 Roasters, Relative Coffee, and Cozy Canine Coffee round out our sponsorship tiers. I can't thank them all enough. This is the last of our interlude episodes before we launch Season 12. Our first guests include Brad Lepper from Council Oak Roasting, Yashawn Smith, barista extraordinaire and coffee educator, and of course the aforementioned Max Zelenovich, champion, coffee roaster, and co-founder of Brainwave Roasters. Thanks to Hacea Coffee Source for inviting me to the party, and thank you for listening, sharing, asking questions, and being coffee curious. This show, the Coffee People Podcast, is part of the Roast West Coast Coffee Network. This episode has been written, produced, researched, and recorded by me, Ryan Woldt. Wherever you find yourself today, I hope it's with a fine cup of coffee. Thank you for listening to us tell the stories of coffee people. Cheers.